I'm looking forward. I'm going to have a lot of good beers. We're going to see a lot of good talks. I think it's going to be really great. So thank you once again. That's shout out number one. Shout out number two, I'm drinking Wendy's. Wendy apparently disappeared. But I'm drinking Paul's beer IPA. Michelle, sorry. I do apologize. I'm drinking Michelle Paul's beer. IPA, and it's, thank you for the free beers, it's a fantastic IPA. Thank you for everyone who did bottle sharing earlier. That was really nice. I think we had a lot of fun. I had too much fun, so I'm going to try and do this talk as best as possible for you guys.
Why don't you start a Warthog's Bloemfontein?
We've got a Bloemfontein for Ventures. We don't need your Warthogs. No. I want to say National Homebrewers came out last night, number 2, Free States. Finalists in other Free States. So we're doing all right on our own. Thank you very much.
You can call it what you want, but join us, man.
We're always up for collaboration. Okay, so liquid culture, can we just ask who's brewed with liquid culture here? No? Some of you have tried our yeast. I hope you've been happy with our yeast. My name's Errol, for those of you who don't know me. Errol! Hello, Paul. I've been asked to just give a short talk about washing your yeast or reusing your yeast. So we grow our own yeast, so we don't really reuse yeast. This was quite a difficult topic for me to actually cover. But I get it. I watched the YouTubes, I listened to the podcasts, I read the Googles. So for anyone who doesn't know how to reuse yeast, I think I've got some valuable information for you here. We even did some experiments. So I know this is a hands-on tutorial, but unfortunately we left Bloemfontein at 3 AM this morning. There was 4 of us in the car, so we didn't have the extra space to put all of the equipment in the car to actually make this a full-on hands-on tutorial. But I did bring some yeast, so if you can just touch it after my talk is done, we can at least make this a hands-on tutorial. I would be very happy about that. Okay, so, like I said, we're talking a little bit about reusing yeast. If we just go to the next slide. So the biggest question, why do you want to reuse yeast? Like I said, we grow our own yeast. We supply, I feel, a very high quality yeast. We grow our yeast in a artificial malt extract media. So once that yeast actually gets used, it's already acclimatized. Sorry, I've had a lot of bottle racing before. But it's already acclimatized to a water media. So, like I said, we don't really specialize in reusing yeast, but you do have the option. And I understand why a home brewer would want to use or do this. And the main advantage would be saving money. Save money, buy more beer, brew more beer. It is something that you can actually do. It's relatively easy if you're careful about what you're doing. I'll talk a lot about it, and you'll see me during this talk highlighting the fact that you can introduce contamination if you want to wash your yeast or reuse your yeast. So that is an important factor that you have to consider. But if you're careful and you know something about yeast and you know something about sanitary practices, then it's relatively easy to actually do. I think the best advantage, is everyone happy with this? Okay, is this better? Should I, like this? Like this? Like this? Okay. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. I think that the greatest use for home brewers for reusing yeast is if you order a yeast somewhere from overseas that we don't stock, and we've got an extensive collection of yeast that you guys can use. But if you got a full yeast from overseas, or you isolated something from a bottle, and you want to reuse the yeast, you brewed with it and you want to brew with it again, then washing your yeast is the best step that you could take. So I think that's the major thing that you can consider for this. The other thing is, if you're not brewing with liquid yeast and you're using dry yeast, I think the other thing that's very important about repitching or reusing yeast is the fact that mature yeast actually makes better beer. So if you're pitching your dry yeast, actually the second or third, the fourth generation of those yeasts is going to actually give you better beer. And that's just the fact that those yeast is actually more acclimated to wort. And the other thing is, it actually results in shorter lag time, just because it's more acclimated to using wort. So, I mean, if your yeast, a lot of people that grow yeast is going to use some fancy lab media to grow it. Dry yeast has been coated and dried, and there's a lot of processes that go into drying yeast, so that yeast is not a happy yeast. I mean, I'm not saying you should not use dry yeast. Dry yeast makes really good beer. But the thing is that it's not a happy yeast. If you think about yourself, if I take you out of this environment and I would dehydrate you, coat you in some kind of nutrient media, put you in a package.
Tomorrow morning.
Yes. And then in like 4 months' time, I force you to make beer. Would you be happy to do that? So it takes time for this beer to actually adjust to the environment that you're putting it into. And this increases lag time. That lag time is how long the beer actually takes to adjust to the wort and then actually start to make your beer. And that's a dangerous time for your beer. Your beer might be susceptible to bacterial infections during that time. It might start producing weird flavors and stuff. So just, yeah. It's a weird time for it.
So there's a risk reward.
There's definitely a risk reward to this whole system. It's going to save you money, it's going to make better beer. But you can introduce contamination.
If I go and I've done both, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a microbiologist, I'm a squad.
Bruce, you make great beer.
I wanted to, when I started brewing 10 years ago, we're doing like cultivation yeast and you never breaking it.
Jules, this is hard work.
Like string, it's all about you.
Bring your bed.
But every beer I want an order on to be effective. And this is the thing. So I know there's a cost differential, like when you're buying US car or whatever, for a dry yeast, basically to kitchen in my it's like food. And I go like, so I buy the cultural ingredients that need to use but I buy the cultural ingredients and I buy I don't know, I buy so expensive microbiology people wanting to do it, but like I go, it's so risk-free to check the packet of years or whatever in a beer, and I get a water-winning beer out of it on round one. And prior to between you and I know after your 5 years, I do this risk. And I'm only brewing one
Listen, Bruce, I've tasted your beer.
And the cost of it to go within the strength is trying to absolutely brilliant service from having the yeast there the next day when you brew. No, but that's the thing, but we're talking about sustainability, sure. Our effects of use that are which a lot of breweries use. It's just like it's years applied, right? It's competitive to life. Like with difficult things is not. That's the reality. No, for hundreds of them.
Bruce, you make good beer. You make fantastic beer. We know that. This weekend is the SAB Intervarsity competition. And I know a lot of people are invited to taste there. A lot of people have tasted there. A lot of these universities do brew with packets of yeast. Some people make fantastic beer with packets of yeast. We have a lot of breweries that we've approached and we're like, listen, we're sorry. We buy the 500 grams of use of and we're happy with that. And that's fine. If you can handle that, that's fantastic. I know you can make a fantastic beer with that dry package. I've met a lot of people who can't do it. And that's the other thing with brewing. It's not just about pitching that yeast. I don't know why it happens. Yes. Please. Okay, always. Well, that's actually what I told you about. I just haven't brought it across my wine yet. I just want to say, we are not anti-dry yeast, not at all. A lot of people make fantastic beer with dry yeast. We offer an alternative. It was definitely an important discussion. But that's
second gen.
So, Bruce, like I said, you're a great guy, you make fantastic beer. Some people can brew with dry yeast. We're the market to pack alternative. We cannot compete at a cost with dry yeast at this point. We're working towards that. Some dry yeast we actually do compete. And we grow our yeast, like I said here, we grow our yeast in a malt substitute media. So you get a yeast that is used to malt already. And if you make fantastic beer without it, like I've tasted your beer, it's fantastic. That's good. Some people can't do it. We've spoken a lot about this. Every brewer seems to be every brewer is different in the process. Every brewer is different in how they treat yeast, how they treat hops, and how they treat malts. Some people take better to our product. Some people go like, this is the same as my dry product. Why should I use the dry product? And we go, use the dry product. We're not in the market to go, don't use the dry product. Sap ale makes fantastic yeast. It's like we offer liquid alternatives. Well, Bruce will talk afterwards. Okay. So, like I said, you're our brewer. you want to save some money, you're buying our yeast from one of the home brew shops, it's costing you 80 to 120 rands to buy our yeast. In Gauteng, we supply to Brew the BB Brew, which is Nobleman, Cactus Brew, Prohibition Brew. You've got a lot of options.
I actually during lockdown bought from some guy who was away.
Like in a back alley, you have to get it from a Jew. Yes, Prohibition and Brewers. Yes, Prohibition is a great. They've got most of our strains. They're actually a very fantastic brew shop. It's Volko, Christopher. Volko from Prohibition. Volko from Prohibition. He's got most of our strains. He's fantastic. It's a great guy. Okay. So we want to talk about you buying yeast and want to saving some money, which is actually counterproductive to what we want to do. We want to sell you yeast. When we want to sell yeast to the home brewer shop. So teaching you this is actually not what we want to do, but we like all of you, so we want to teach you how to wash your yeast, how to wash it in such a way that you don't contaminate the beer that you pitch it into. Because that's the big thing. Can you go to the next slide, please? That's my biggest consideration. If you want to be washing, reusing yeast, you would have to take the risk that this is an environment in which I can introduce contamination. I'm going to be adding water to my yeast, I'm going to be swirling it, I'm going to be putting it into a jar, I'm going to be putting that into other jars to store it, to put it into my beer. So you can introduce contamination. And that is something you have to take into consideration. And we'll talk a bit about how you can sterilize, what you should be sterilizing, and where you should be watching for contamination in your beer. But that's the major thing. The other thing, while we're talking about this, is, like I said, we want to talk about you can introduce spoilage organisms, but if you think about your beers and what you want to brew and when you want to brew what, making beer is hard work for yeast. They have to deal with high sugar concentrations. They get coated in isomerized alpha acids, which prohibit them from multiplying and actually doing fermentation. So making beer is hard for yeast. So you have to think about this. If you want to repitch yeast, wash yeast and use it again, if I start out and I make a beer and it's a super double IPA and it's 40% and there's 200 IBUs in there, you're probably not going to be able to repitch that yeast. Like that yeast has worked hard enough. Like let it go. Like buy new yeast. I'll talk a bit. What happened to my slide? Okay. So think about it. It's actually a lot of fun to repitch yeast. If you start with small batches and you work your way up to larger batches, it's something that's feasible that you can do. And by making starters, you actually get extra batches of beer that you can drink going onto your bigger beers that you want to brew. And then the last thing is you can repitch yeast. You can wash it, reuse it, but this is not an indefinite process. Yeast mutates, it starts not to function as it should, it starts making weird compounds and flavors. So I would say about five to six times if you want to wash and reuse your yeast, but after that it gets weird. Especially if you want to brew beer just to drink at home, that's fine. If you want to enter competitions or if you're operating at a commercial level, don't repitch like too many times. I spoke to Dion. No, you're not Dion. Give me 1 second. It really depends on the styles of beer you're making, and yeah, it depends on the styles. Like, so you're using USM5, you're making a pale ale, it's 31 IBUs, it's 5% alcohol. Repitch it like 8 times.
8 times.
No, don't quote me on this. But you can. We have breweries that repitch a lot of times.
Yeah.
You're making a Russian Imperial, it's 40%, it's 200 IBUs. Like, it's not gonna work.
A pale ale, whatever you
Like, easily 5, 6, 7 times. Like,
5, 6 or 7.
yes.
Yeast is divided every 2.5 hours.
Who has the mic?
Oh, it's yeast.
Oh!
I will take it to the chopper. The yeast divides every 2.5 hours. So every 2.5 hours you get out the number that you had before. So, I mean, the question of how long can you do that? You know, it's okay. So we get tired after a while. You know, so 8, 9 times is and the mutation rate goes up and up because remember every time you divide, you know, there is a certain mutation rate that goes in there. So the DNA is not like that anymore, and the things coming in, and it is. I would say maybe 6 times, but not more than that.
But that's my thing. It really depends on your process and your beers. I mean, if you're making a pale ale, it's taking you 3 weeks to do your primary fermentation. You're leaving that in primary for another 3 weeks. You're going to secondary for another month, like once. So don't do it more than once. If you're fermenting in a couple of days, you're harvesting your yeast, this goes to the secondary, you want to reuse that yeast, I would say 5, 6 times. But it's actually a very difficult topic to cover, and it's actually very dependent on the beer you're making and the process that you're following in your brewery.
So can I